Okay, so I was in a Google Plus chat room with a group of Antifa members, and after I got bored of talking to them, I figured I'd go online, see what else they were doing, because I remember when they were bothering Lawrence Southern and stuff like that. And there was a lot of talk about websites that they had, and groups of faces, things like that they had out there. So I figured I'd see if I can get in myself, see what these guys are doing, why they're doing it. If they were smart, I wouldn't expect to be able to, but so far they haven't been doing a great job. The reason that I'm making this video is because of this right here. When I googled Antifa, third thing that popped up after two articles here, but one of which is obviously clickbait, and this one, America's Extremist Battle. Yeah, whatever. I think Antifa is a lot larger than the actual neo-Nazi alt-right, but that's neither here nor there. The point is this: forming an Antifa group, a manual. And when I opened it, this thing is actually hilarious if we were to go through it. What I've done is just pulled up Alinsky's 12 Rules for Radicals. Not because I think that it's too important, but because if they were smart, this is what they'd be using. Alinsky was a communist, Saul Alinsky, in Chicago in the early 1900s, I believe it was, and he was a genius at generating controversy and basically allowing groups that did not have the establishment power to overthrow everything, the status quo. But let's just take a quick look at Alinsky's Rules for Radicals, see what we're working with. And what you'll notice, if you don't know these, is the alt-right pretty much nailed these, the whole Trump campaign. And when I say the alt-right here, I'm not talking about the neo-Nazis, like when the media says the alt-right. I'm just talking about the counterculture that was rebelling against the mainstream leftist narrative. I'm not 100% for that, and there's a lot of people in that movement I certainly disagree with, and that stopped before the neo-Nazis. However, I don't think it's fair to categorize them all as insane, and I don't think it's fair to categorize them all as even far-right necessarily. Here we go, the 12 Rules for Radicals. We have Rule 1, power is not only what you have, but what the enemy thinks you have. Power is derived from two main sources, money and people. So you'll have the have-nots, who must build power from flesh and blood, which are two things in plentiful supply. Basically what they're saying there is essentially just that you want to make the enemy think that you have a lot more than you have, and then you have extra power over them, because you can bluff them. And if you notice that Rule 1 right there is textbook alt-right move, because like I just said, it was mostly a bunch of shit posters just yelling shadalay at each other, basically just posting Pepe memes. Occasionally people would make racist ones, and because of those occasional racist ones, they tricked the media and the actual Hillary Clinton campaign after she gave her speech on the alt-right into thinking they were this group of neo-Nazis with this massive grassroots power structure, and it's hilarious. I mean, the actual amount of neo-Nazis in the United States has got to be under 10,000, and that's, I think, being generous, honestly. Now, let's look at rule number 2. Never go outside of the expertise of your people. Okay, so the alt-right nailed this again because they were basically shit posters, right? So how did they engage? They did engage with a lot of facts that they did bring to the debate, but they only brought in pretty much facts that the media was hiding from everybody. So facts that wouldn't be expected. I didn't see them too often actually engaging in a lot of serious political debate. I know a lot of Republicans, people generally on the right, who did try that, but it wasn't really much of an alt-right tactic. All they really did was just shitpost, and it ended up scaring the media so badly because the media thought they were actual neo-Nazis that it created a massive shit show, and it actually allowed the alt-right to get a massive upper hand. But rule number 3, whenever possible, go outside the expertise of the enemy. That's, yeah, nailed in the Hillary Clinton speech on the alt-right. And just the whole Pepe thing, when the Southern Poverty Law Center classified him as a hate symbol, I mean, that was the epitome of just general ridiculousness. Because Pepe the Frog is a meme. A meme can be used by anybody in any context, and Pepe the Frog, way before this, was used in a lot of contexts. He's been around for like over a decade, usually sad, but pretty much any manner of emotions have been attributed to that frog, and he's probably been in almost every situation by now. So the fact that they wanted to relegate it to 1 just because it was once or twice used in an antagonistic way is ridiculous, and the reason they decided to do that is because they were way outside of their expertise. Rule 4 is to make the enemy live up to its own book of rules. In that rule, if every letter gets a reply, send 30,000 letters. You can kill them with this because no one can possibly obey all of their own rules. I mean, they didn't really need to do too much here. The ideology of progressivism loses all of its internal consistency if you push it to the highest boundaries. Now, that's not to say that there are not ideologies on the right, which also lose all of their internal consistency. I personally like to call the Democrats and the Republicans in this country the hypocrite twins sometimes, just because they both do the exact same thing and fall into similar thinking patterns. But social justice in general, once you start dealing with that progressive stack, everything about it becomes extremely hypocritical. And even when you're applying things to the progressive stack directly, you still wind up making different judgments in situations with the only differentiating factor being things like skin color or gender. And this is just bluntly obvious to anybody who's not deeply indoctrinated into the political debate really on either side. 5 is that ridicule is man's most potent weapon. Yeah, I'm not even going to comment any further on that. That one stands on its own. Rule number 6, a good tactic is one your people enjoy. Well, shitposting, I'm speaking from experience this time, is extremely entertaining. I mean, it's something that I'm sure anybody who can get paid to shitpost will just do it indefinitely, because unless you're really hurting people, and in this case, there wasn't many people being seriously hurt, I do feel bad for those people who really just were breaking down in tears and stuff like that, but that's almost just proof that this is a necessary evil, because they needed to be brought down a peg. They should not have been that effective in the first place. Yeah, because of that, it really allowed everybody who was engaging in shitposting during the election to just, and these ridiculous tactics, to just have a field day. They just went with it, and not only were they arguing politics brilliantly, they were having a fantastic time of it. Now, to clarify that, they weren't necessarily arguing politics so much as they were generally just distracting from all of the legitimate talking points that were going on over on the left. And, well, not so much distracting either, deconstructing. They would just, with 1 or 2 posts, as long as you're a good shitposter, you can blow up a narrative. It's got no internal consistency. Anyway, rule number 7, a tactic that drags on too long becomes a drag. Don't become old news. That one also goes without saying. Generally, the point is just to keep up with stuff. That's one of those areas where I find the left really shot themselves in the foot this election, just because, I mean, when I think back to months and months leading up to the election, the biggest thing that I remember driving news between debates and such is generally just social justice warriors making asses of themselves in public. Things like that woman Annalise in the lift car, or you have Miss Josh up in Seattle, I believe it was, with Humongous. I'm sure you guys all remember it by that name. Alongside, I can think of probably 10 off the top of my head, just instances from that specific several-month time period of social justice warriors going ballistic on people, regular, everyday, ordinary people, for absolutely no reason. And this went viral and kept the narrative up. Which leads us into rule number 8, keep the pressure on and never let up. Again, that's one of those things that just essentially got done. The left did it to themselves. I mean, the right did push, just because there was such an unorthodox amount of people who were just constantly doing this. But part of that also feeds into the fact that it's fun. And that's one of the things that's so brilliant about these rules, really, and one of the reasons that they work so well. They feed into each other. It's like a snowball rolling downhill, and once the thing starts going, it really just picks up momentum and becomes almost a self-fulfilling prophecy. Rule number 9, the threat is usually more terrifying than the thing itself. Imagination and ego can dream up many more consequences than an activist. Perception is reality. Well, yeah, I mean, I'm just gonna leave that one at shitposting, because it does get a little bit more complicated, but essentially, I'm sure you guys can see where it's going. Plus, I didn't mean to spend so long on these anyway. 10, if you push a negative hard enough, it will push through and become a positive. Well, yeah, look at Pepe. I mean, this thing got decried by almost every major mainstream media outlet after Hillary Clinton's speech and the Southern Poverty Law Center as an international hate symbol. Just an international symbol of anti-Semitism, which got recognized additionally as a Nazi symbol. I mean, that's really bad news. The only thing is, once it was not let up and everybody just kept using it, they had no choice but to essentially just drop it, because you can't enforce something if everyone is doing it. Rule 11, the price of a successful attack is a constructive alternative. Okay, so basically just saying you can't let your enemy gain any ground. The instant they gain ground, it's going to legitimize them in the face of everything that you've been saying, and it's going to take away from whatever ground you have managed to claw for yourself. This is extremely important in movements that are going to be following these rules. And the reason for that is just because these movements that are going to be needing to use these rules don't tend to have very much ground to stand on. And that's not to say that they're wrong. It's to say specifically that they don't have very much credibility, very much power, be it institutional, in any form, corporate, governmental, etc. These guys are the have-nots. You know, they're trying to come out of nowhere and upset the status quo. So it's very, very, very important that they don't give an inch as they're taking forward, because if you give an inch, then they will take a mile, because they've got way more leverage on every inch that they take than you will. Rule number 12 is to pick the target, freeze it, personalize it, and polarize it. So basically you're cutting off the support network and isolating the target from sympathy. Now, I'm not sure if you guys remember the literally shaking hashtag on Twitter that was going around. If you think about the way the end of that movement dichotomized itself, it basically turned into exactly that situation. Again, I'm not sure the alt-right was necessarily deliberately following these data points. I have no idea, and I can't imagine they did, because Saul Alinsky was a fairly famous Marxist whose books have been touted a lot on the left, but it's very ironic that the alt-right are the ones who ended up pretty much following this for that series of months, and spectacularly. So it was a very, very interesting accident, to say the least. If anyone still remembers the start of the video, it should be pretty obvious by now that I'm doing a two-parter here. Basically what happened is that guide to creating an Antifa chapter, essentially, that I was looking at in the beginning is the reason that I brought up Rules for Radicals and that we did this video. As I was reading through it, they said a bunch of alarming things. Alarming at least to the capacity at which it really made me stop and take a longer look at it. You'll see my demeanor change once we get over it and once we get to that particular video, but it came so long that I decided to do this Alinsky little explainer as a separate video, and that other part will be coming. It's going to be longer, but I do highly recommend that, especially if you sat through this one, you take the time to look at that, because as much as we already know how insane they are, and trust me, I am among the people who believes myself to know how insane they are, this is something completely different. It's not the end of the world either, but at the same time it's rather alarming, even next to my expectations of this particular group, which I did not think could be significantly lower. But unfortunately, very much unfortunately, I was wrong. So we'll do that as soon as I can get it out. Hopefully we win the battle of ideas early, but either way it's a good idea just to get to know how these people think. And this guide is actually going to be a really good way of doing that. Plus it's going to just allow us a little window into the way they're thinking and the way they're looking to go about targeting things, because essentially they've put it all out there. They're just pretty wide open about things, even though they're constantly wide open about the fact that they're trying to be closed-lipped about things. That's just another one of the ironies that gets stacked onto the huge hero sandwich of irony that is this video that's coming up. It's also going to be rather entertaining for those of you who possess the capability to just sit back and laugh when things get bizarre. But for me, it's just a little bit perturbing, especially considering the violent implications. Just having been around that type of attitude, it's something which does bother me, but it also makes me glad that I'm able to have this platform and this window into their views so that we can all take a look at it, disseminate it, and then take steps against it as we see fit. So I hope as many of you as possible will take that journey with me, and I also hope that this video was useful or helpful for those of you who don't want to watch the next video, as well as those of you who do. Alinsky is great, and the most important thing to know about Alinsky, just to conclude this video here, is that you can use Alinsky no matter where you are on the political spectrum. His rules for radicals pretty much apply to anybody who does not have any legitimate channels open to them for success. Now, this puts you in a precarious position, so if you're in a place where you feel the need to use or can significantly benefit from Alinsky's rules for radicals, then I would be wary of yourself and your own position, and I would definitely make sure I look internally before I look externally. That said, in cases like this election where it was used for better or for worse by Trump supporters, that's definitely one of those situations where you can see why people might have been justified in actually using these kinds of tactics. Even if you're not the one using them, it's still super helpful to know them for when other people are using them against you. If you don't, and you don't make sure that you're aware and on top of these things, you could wind up going down as the person who declared war on a cartoon frog and lost. That's all I have to say for today. Catch you later.